This is a 2000 Honda Civic EX 1.6 liter with almost 170,000 miles on it. Now we only have 2 years worth of history on this car, and in those 2 years the clutch has not been replaced. But the owner has reported that the clutch is now slipping under power when he accelerates. So here's a very short video clip, and look carefully, you'll see the tachometer spike and the speedometer stays put. The engine is overpowering the clutch. So with a new clutch and flywheel, that'll be the end of that slipping. So let's find out what it takes to put a clutch in a Honda Civic EX. Some of the stuff you'll need to remove or disconnect: the battery, air intake system, passenger side wheel, passenger side axle nut, lower ball joint connection, tie rod end connection, strut fork. You will need to support the engine, the speedometer. There's a hydraulic hose for the slave cylinder bracket, slave cylinder itself, starter. Need to drain the fluid out of the transaxle. There are 3 transaxle mounts, driver side inboard constant velocity joint, shifter connections, and then the transaxle to engine bolts. Let's take a quick look at the transmission while we've got it out. When I remove this axle shaft, I look behind this seal, and right down in here underneath behind the seal there's a bunch of bearing separator cage, that non-metallic cage that separates the ball bearings. So I think that obviously, along with this input shaft moving up and down like that, that's telling us this transmission needs to be professionally rebuilt, and it is going out for a rebuild. We are not a transmission shop. The other thing, whenever a transmission comes off or when it goes out for repair, something real important that everybody needs to be aware of: the dowel sleeve. Right now one is stuck in the transmission case. I'm going to take it out. But if this went out, or if it was an exchange transmission and I go to put it back in, I've only got one dowel sleeve right now, I'm going to recreate alignment problems for the clutch disc because the center line of the crankshaft and the input shaft won't be common. It's these 2 dowel sleeves that control the alignment, so I have to take care of that. And somewhere this car, this engine, has got a pretty nasty oil leak. So we've got a little bit of work to do here. Well, let's check the condition of the transmission, the fork, and the bearing. There is a retaining clip back there. I already kind of unhooked it so I'd have an easy time pulling this off. So there's the pivot ball pocket, the pivot ball, the retaining clip. And we've got a little bit of flat spot on the bearing here. We'll take a closer look at that. Still a lot of oil up there. Well, here's the parts we've been looking for. Now, I haven't cleaned it off yet, so I can't really tell if this is an original clutch or a replacement. When I clean it up, I'll be able to see the marks on it and tell. But there's a pretty good amount of wear on the fingertips of the diaphragm spring. We've got an active oil leak. Now, I did take a look. The disc looks a little bit thin, so it could be a combination of contamination and normal wear that's causing the slippage. But I don't think we can rule out contamination. That's a lot of slime out there in that ring gear. So let me get a wrench on there. We'll get that clutch cover loosened up and take a look, see what kind of condition we've got for a clutch. 1 bolt to go. It's staying on the pins right now, on the dowel pins. Let me see if I can walk it off. There it is. Yeah, there's a little contamination there. Yep. There's the pilot bearing. It still turns. Flywheel's a little hot. Somebody's been having a little fun with this car. Remember, we took the clutch out. You said it was slipping and it was contaminated. So right up here, this is the distributor, the cam. There's a pretty good oil leak coming off right there. So on the maintenance log, it's noted as observed evidence of oil leaking. Action, removed evidence of oil leak. One flywheel bolt to go. All right, let's see what we got. A lot of oil. Huh. What's that? Taking a look at this system, spring tip wear, obvious contamination. Pop it off the flywheel. Now, this is the flywheel side of the friction material, and it does show what you might call some glazing. It's a little polished looking. You can see some tracers of contamination coming out. Here's the pressure plate side. Now you can really see a lot of contamination. And something else that really sets this apart, in these rivet holes, the clutch dust isn't dust. It has actually been made into like a mud with that oil or something. There you can see the clutch dust is now like a mud, and it's on this side of the facing. It's in the rivet grooves right here, it's in the rivet holes, it's all over. This is absolutely contaminated. Flywheel, I'll have to clean it up a little bit to see if I can tell if it's resurfaced, but I'm a little skeptical that it has been resurfaced because the pressure plate side casting isn't showing the same color. It's showing some hot spots. I'll have to clean this up to know for sure. But just continuing with this contamination theme, this whole interior of the casting is, or the stamping, excuse me, is just packed with contaminants. So we've really got a contaminated clutch. Now this transaxle has gone out to a professional transmission shop, and they replaced the bearings and I think one of the shift forks in it. So now the input shaft is all nice and tight. It also got cleaned up real good while it was out, so there's no crud, no rust on the splines. So first thing we want to do to prepare it, we put a little pack of grease in each kit. Just going to put the grease on there, and there's not very much in there. You just want to put a light film. All we're trying to do is prevent corrosion, which would cause the disc to not slide freely on there. So take the grease pack and just spread it around. Just trying to put a film on there. And do not use anti-seize right here. Anti-seize will fling off, contaminate the disc again, and we start all over again with a slip and clutch. Okay. Clean hands. Take the clutch disc, slide it on. You're checking the fit, and you're distributing that grease. We just want that film on there. So when I'm done, I'll wipe up any excess, and the disc also has a flywheel side orientation. So this little excess right here, just discard that. Now the old pivot ball was pretty badly worn right here. So we got a new pivot ball, it's installed. New clutch fork, got a lot of wear right here on the tips. So I'm going to put a little dab of grease where it pivots on the ball here, pivots on that pivot ball. Going to put a little bit right there where it touches the back of the bearing. Now the clutch release bearing only requires just a light film on the guide tube here. So make sure that's not worn out, not in bad shape. A lot of people comment when they replace the clutch that they're surprised how light the pedal effort is. And they're thinking, man, that clutch is so weak, it can't hold. Probably a lot of what happened is right here. Corrosion, grit, dust, causes friction, takes extra effort to overcome. Plus, as the clutch disc gets thinner from normal wear, what we call the release load, how hard you have to push on the pedal, that increases. So cleaning this up, putting a little bit of lube where it needs to be, makes the pedal effort back to where it was. Pivot ball retaining clip. Gotta make sure I put it in the right way. Okay. A little bit of grease on the back of the fork there. Slide it up in here. There it is. So that would be the release position, as if you're pushing down, engaged for driving, and it backs up to accommodate for wear. Nice and smooth. Well, the pilot bearing in this case goes in the flywheel, but it's on the back side, on the crankshaft side. So how do you install it? Sure, there's multiple ways to do it. If your arbor press was deep enough that the flywheel sat in there, you could use an arbor press. I think a lot of guys are going to reach for maybe a socket, or if they've got a driver set and a hammer, and just politely tap it in. But here's another way that you can make a little mini press out of, in this case, it's a piece of 1/2-inch threaded rod. So we're just going to put the bearing up there, take a socket that goes on the outside diameter of the bearing, washer, nut. Now there's not much force to this, that's not the issue. Just don't want to hit it or drive it in crooked. But I've used this technique of a little threaded rod press on a lot of jobs where I didn't have the right press to do it, or something needed to be portable. You can feel it seating. Nice clean way to install that bearing in the flywheel. I cleaned up the back of the engine a little bit here. There was that very predominant oil leak. A couple observations. A heat tab indicates if the engine's been overheated, so I think this tells us this was a rebuilt, remanufactured engine. I replaced the alignment sleeves. One stuck in the transmission, took that out, put it back in the block. Rear main looks good. There is evidence maybe of some oil pan leak, but that's outside the scope of our video. So the flywheel, I've already pressed the pilot bearing in. It went in from the back side. Each bolt has a drop of medium strength thread locking compound on it. I need to hold the flywheel steady, keep the engine from rotating. So I'm going to use this little piece of channel that I've used before. My little flywheel, flex plate sections that I've got didn't fit this one. So let me just seat these bolts and then we'll start the torque process. 87 pound-feet, and I'll do that in a 2-step tightening process. .87 pound-feet. Flywheel's installed and torqued. Pilot bearing is installed. Time to clean. You need this friction surface to be completely clean, grease-free, oil-free. So we're going to use clean rags, brake clean. Repeat with clean rags a couple times. Get everything off. And we'll repeat the same cleaning process for the friction surface, the casting here of the pressure plate. Again, brake clean, clean rags. Now let's take a quick look at the flywheel. Kind of a big gap here, kind of a small gap here, kind of a small gap there. So this pressure plate is only going to go on in one place. So I'm going to try and find the wide gap here between the bolt and the dowel pin. There it is. It'll be that one right there. With clean hands, put the clutch disc in the pressure plate. Real small drop of medium strength thread locking compound. Just going to start some bolts and then get the alignment tool. Okay, the bolts are just barely making contact. Put the alignment tool in. Pick up the pilot. I'm going to push in pretty good and just make sure that that clutch disc is centered. I'm going to switch out to a ratchet. Real important. Make sure that alignment tool slides in fully, picks up the pilot, nice and smooth. If that disc is not centered up good, when you go to install the transmission, oh boy. So, let me get a ratchet and I'll just start drawing these bolts down. Crisscross pattern. Sorry, no air tools. Gotta do this by hand. Just going to draw it down. Alright, the bolts are seated. I've got a little flywheel lock in here. 18 pound-feet, not much. There we go, all torqued down. Now, I just snap my fingers and that transaxle will just fly up in there. Right. Well, the clutch installation on this Civic is done. Let me try and recap it and see if I can remember all the things we found and worked on. Clutch was slipping. Camshaft seal was just drenching the inside of the transaxle with oil. That'll be covered separately and not a part of this video, but that camshaft seal needs to be replaced. Hey Gary, take a look at these pictures. This car doesn't even have a camshaft lip seal like you thought. All it has is an O-ring on the distributor housing. Real easy. Mark the position of the distributor, remove 3 bolts, pull it out, clean it, replace the O-ring, put a little motor oil on it, slide it back in, put it back on your index mark. But this car was leaking so bad on the test drive, we couldn't even release it. We had to fix it before it got to our brand new clutch. There really wasn't anything really unique about the clutch. It's pretty straightforward. Diaphragm style pressure plate assembly, clutch disc is pretty traditional, release bearing, fork, pivot ball. The clutch installation on this car and this series just needs good installation practices and attention to detail. The transmission, now that needed some help. The owner took that to a local shop and they professionally rebuilt the transaxle, so that was part of it. Bearings and I think a shift fork was bad. We also got a new axle shaft in the job too because one of the boots was leaking. This engine and transmission have been apart previously and I'm afraid that they didn't put on some of the stays or stabilizers, gussets, whatever you want to call it, at the bottom of the engine to the transaxle. So the owner will have to try and keep his eye out for those. So if you have any questions about a clutch, flywheel, or a hydraulic system, please call our toll-free Clutch Tech support hotline.